Okay, I'm going to start this afternoon. Welcome back. We're going to start with breathing mindfulness meditation. And since you guys have all been meditating with me, I'm just going to do the chanting and then we'll meditate and come out with the chanting. You guys can be meditating without guidance. This will be helpful for you. So if you'd like to join for meditation, whether you're here, whether you're online, you're welcome to join. Normally I would give guidance during the meditation, but since we're teaching this class and the students have all been meditating with me, I'm not going to do any guidance. So for those of you guys online, if you haven't meditated with me before, all you need to do is focus on the breath. And whenever you notice the mind moves off the breath, just cut that off and bring the mind back to the breath. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Photang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakato rokavitu Anuttaro purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะเกวาพุทธังมะเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมะเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, I'm going to share this topic with you of animal to human, the evolution of our consciousness. This is oftentimes an introduction to the cycle of rebirth for people who are learning the path to enlightenment. It's later in volume 11 where you'll learn all about the realms of existence and the cycle of rebirth, and you might be gradually making your way through that, and it takes a good 1.5 to 2 years to get to that point. But here at as people are starting to learn the teachings, I introduce you to the cycle of rebirth through helping you understand how this human existence that you have, this hasn't been your first existence, and there's been previous births before this, and what you're experiencing through craving, anger, and ignorance in the unenlightened state in this human existence has been conditioned based on experiences from your animal existences. And as you know, and I've taught many times, is you're not believing any of the teachings. Anything that I share with you about this topic, you don't need to believe this, and I'm not suggesting that you should, but as you learn and you understand more, you can actually independently verify this. And some of the things that I'm sharing with you today about the cycle of rebirth, you're going to be able to independently verify. But to be able to independently verify the entire cycle of rebirth, I have that in volume 11, chapter 105. So if you'd like to go beyond what I'm sharing here, because my goal isn't to help you at this particular time to independently verify the cycle of rebirth, that's later in volume 11. Right now, it's just about helping you get introduced to the cycle of rebirth and start to see these correlations and these connections between the unskillful moral conduct that we have in the unenlightened state to our existences in the animal realm. Because if you understand that and you start to learn that here, then you can learn as you're making your way closer and closer to enlightenment, what you're doing is you're shedding these animalistic instincts. And this can actually help you to be able to make your way closer and closer to enlightenment enlightenment because you can identify, that's something as being an animal. I'm not interested in doing that anymore. I'm in the human realm now. I would like to get away from this animalistic behavior. So I'm going to share all these different things with you as we go. So first, just kind of reorienting you to the problems in the unenlightened mind, which is craving, anger, and ignorance. This is the 3 poisons, the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. This is the high-level description of the problems in the unenlightened mind that you've all learned at different times with me. You just learned about personal existence view and conceit. This is where the mind is confused and has this concept of a self, and there's this ego, this arrogance and pride. And I talked a little bit before lunch about this pecking order that the mind has, right? This is what the conceit does, is that even in the human realm, you're looking for this pecking order. Well, your current life and your previous lives as well, this has conditioned your mind. There are certain things that you've been exposed to growing up as a child. There are certain things in certain countries that we've lived in, certain places that we've been in terms of where we've worked or where we've lived, that has conditioned our mind to think a certain way. And what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're clearing out all that conditioning. Well, it's not just your current life that has informed your mind and had your mind develop certain conditions, but it's your previous lives too. And you'll be able to see this as I talk today about the various aspects of the animal realm and what you're experiencing in this human existence. And the other problem that each individual is experiencing is this cycle of rebirth, this continuous birth, this continuous difficulties with sickness, aging, and death. These are the problems that the mind is experiencing. The craving, anger, ignorance, which is essentially the 10 fetters, this personal existence view and conceit, this conditioning of the mind that the mind's been taking on during this life and previous lives, and then being constantly stuck in the cycle of rebirth, the mind's taking on more and more conditioning. So what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're unraveling all of that. You're purifying the mind. You're getting rid of all those conditions. So part of what you're getting rid of is these animalistic instincts that you don't need anymore because you're not in the animal realm. You're in the human realm. You're not an animal. Oftentimes people consider human beings to be animals, where we're not animals. We're actually human beings. But yes, the unenlightened mind functions very much like an animal. And that's why oftentimes people associate what we do in the human realm to being an animal. But we're not an animal, and we can become a better and better human being. So let's talk about these 5 realms, and then we'll go into talking about the evolution of our consciousness from animal to human. But let's understand each of these realms first. So there's the heavenly realm, which in this particular realm, these are formless beings that don't have physical form. They're experiencing exclusively pleasant feelings. They have the ability to cultivate their mind to attain enlightenment, but they oftentimes lack motivation because they're only experiencing happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. And because of that, their life is quite wonderful. They're just experiencing that conditional happiness over and over and over and over again. They never experience the painful feelings. So because of that, they tend to lack motivation to be able to get to enlightenment. But they have the ability in the heavenly realm to get to enlightenment. Some of those beings will get to enlightenment, but many of them don't because they're complacent. So they end up back into other realms. They can go from heaven down to hell, into the animal realm, the afflicted spirit, into the human realm, and they can also be reborn back into the heavenly realm too. None of these realms are permanent existences, so oftentimes we're taught that the heavenly realm is a permanent existence. But if you've verified the universal truth of impermanence, then you know that there's no way that the heavenly realm is permanent, even though that might be some conditioning that we've been taught through our life that somehow the heavenly realm is permanent. But if you look around the world and you can understand and independently verify the cycle of the universal truth of impermanence, then you can see that there's no way that this heavenly realm can be permanent because nothing around you is permanent. So how could this heavenly realm be permanent? So getting to heaven, while sometimes people set that as a aspiration of theirs, it's not the ultimate goal, because when you're in the heavenly realm, you still need to get to enlightenment. And oftentimes, because there's a lack of motivation, those beings don't do that. So that's not the ideal existence. But the human realm is actually the ideal existence. As much difficulty as it is in the unenlightened state to be in the human realm, it's actually the ideal existence. The reason why is because in the human realm, we experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. We have the ability to get to enlightenment, and those painful feelings and the feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant tend to be the motivation. That tends to be the built-in motivation, because we don't like that stress. We don't like the anxiety. We don't like the bitterness and hostility. We don't like the resentfulness and the loneliness and the boredom, and we're interested in getting away from that stuff. Where in the heavenly realm, they don't have that, so they don't have the built-in motivation that we have in the human realm. So this is actually the ideal existence, where we can get to enlightenment, and we have this built-in motivation because of the painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant. So in the human realm, you guys know that this isn't a permanent existence either, that we can ultimately move into one of these other realms. We've been countless existences in the past, and now we're in this human realm. But depending on what we do in this existence is going to determine what's next. Either we can get to enlightenment and escape this whole cycle of rebirth, or we can continue to go around and around and around and around in this cycle of rebirth. It's up to us. It's our choice. Once you attain enlightenment and you die, the Buddha leaves this as an undeclared teaching. He actually specifically calls it an undeclared teaching. There's different times in his teachings where he says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And he points to the Four Noble Truths. He says, I taught discontentedness, the cause of discontentedness, the elimination of it, and the path forward of how to eliminate discontentedness. That's what I taught. And then he says, remember what I didn't teach. And he gives you 10 things that he didn't teach. And one of the things that he didn't teach is whether or not you exist or you don't exist after this life, once you attain enlightenment. And I have various reasons why I suspect he didn't teach that, and we can talk about that when we get to questions if you guys like. But there's very specific reasons why I think he didn't teach that, which we can talk about if you like. But what happens next after enlightenment, if there is something next or there isn't something next, it's an undeclared teaching. So this practice of getting to enlightenment, it's not about believing a bunch of things and then having some kind of afterlife in one of these realms. The whole goal of the path to enlightenment is to escape the discontentedness and escape the cycle of rebirth. And in the human realm, this is the ideal existence to do that. You're able to do that from this human existence. So the Buddha oftentimes teaches about don't allow this human existence to go to waste. Right? Don't be complacent. And he also talks about how many countless rebirths that we've all experienced in the past. He gives some analogies. He says, all the water in all of the seas, this is more, the amount of tears that you have cried in your previous lives is more water than all the water in all the sea. So if you've done any scuba diving or if you've been anywhere where there's been a lot of water, he says all the water in all of the seas is less than the tears that you've cried in your previous existences. And he also uses the same analogy for the blood. He says the blood that you've had in all your previous existences is more voluminous than all the water in all the seas. And he even talks about it in terms of your mother's milk. The mother's milk that you've drank in your previous existences is more than all the water of all the seas. So when we talk about the Buddha living 2,500 years ago, that just seems to some of us like so long ago. But if you think about the history of the planet is said to be 4.5 billion years. Billion with a B. That's like an unfathomable number that we can't even imagine this planet being here for that many years, right? So our little existence of 80 to 100 years, it's like a blink of an eye in terms of the history of the entire planet. So it's very easy to see that we've been a worm, a lizard, a monkey, a giraffe, a this, a that, maybe a human, maybe a heavenly being, maybe in the hell realm, maybe in the afflicted spirit, over these countless years that have been happening. Over 4.5 billion years is what scientists think the planet has been here for. So that means there's been existences after existence after existence. So it's very easy to see how we could have existed in all those different times and all these different existences. So all the water of all the seas is less than the amount of tears that we've cried in all those previous existences. So this human realm, now that you're in this human existence, it's the ideal opportunity to get to enlightenment and train your mind to be able to do that. So the Buddha encourages us not to be complacent, and I would encourage you the same way, is not to be complacent and allow this human existence to go to waste. Then there's this afflicted spirit realm, where some people might refer to this as ghost, or you might have heard this referred to as hungry ghost. The reason why people refer to this as hungry ghost is because there's a certain amount of craving that exists in the mind to be able to be reborn down into this realm. This is what's considered the lower realms: afflicted spirit, animal realm, and heaven, hell realm. And we don't consider these beings to be below us in terms of we're better than them. That would be conceit. All beings are equal in my mind, right? But we do refer to these as the lower realms, because these lower realms, you can't get to enlightenment. And in this afflicted spirit realm, or hungry ghost, or the ghost realm, this is a formless realm where these beings don't have physical form, and they have craving in their mind. They have a certain amount of craving and anger and ignorance, and they have been reborn there in order to extinguish their karma. Oftentimes, these individuals that have been reborn there, they're holding on and they're clinging. This is where you hear people say that there's some ghost that is haunting this house. Where maybe they were living in that house, they were clinging to that house, they were holding on to it, and when they died from the human existence, they are still holding on to that house. And this is where we might say they're haunting the house, where in reality they're just choosing to stay in that area. They're still holding on to it, they still have clinging. So these beings experience painful feelings and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. They don't experience any pleasant feelings in the ghost realm. These beings cannot cultivate their mind in order to get to enlightenment, and they tend to have this craving and this clinging to people, places, and possessions. And this is why they're being reborn in that realm, because their mind is still holding on. Then there's the animal realm. These beings experience pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant, all three feelings, but they don't have the ability to actually get to enlightenment. So like the dogs out in the parking lot, they can't come in here and listen to the Four Noble Truths, intellectually understand it, do some loving kindness meditation to get rid of their anger, get rid of their conceit and all these kinds of things. They just don't have the capability to do that. They can become a bit more loving and a bit more warm and kind, especially when humans are involved to train them, but left to their own devices, they wouldn't tend to do that. That's why we have wild dogs, and oftentimes the dogs aren't necessarily being taken care of, and this is why they become kind of vicious sometimes, because they're street dogs. They're not living close by with human beings. But animals that live close by with human beings, they're learning and they're being trained, so their consciousness is evolving, but left to their own devices, that wouldn't be what they experience. But even in a big pack of monkeys, for example, I don't know if what they call those, whether it's a herd or what they call a pack of monkeys, but even in that pack, there's going to be some that are more bitter and harsh and hostile, and some that are a bit more loving and more nurturing and more compassionate, even in the wild. So these beings in the animal realm, they're oftentimes being reborn around countless existences, and their mind is evolving little by little by little. This is why you can see something like an elephant is more loving and warm and compassionate than like a tiger or a lion. Those animals are very fierce. And being in the animal realm, it's like being trapped in a prison. This is the way the Buddha describes it. Because once you're in the animal realm, it's very hard to get out. You can get out and you will get out, but it's very challenging to get out. Because being in an animal existence means that in a lot of cases, you are killing in order to sustain your life. Because remember, these natural laws of existence, they're affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. So if you're going around constantly killing just to sustain your life, this is producing all kinds of unwholesome karma for you. This is why lions tend to live for about 8 to 12 years. They usually die in a very short time frame, where animals like an elephant or a turtle or something like this, they live for a lot longer because they tend to not kill. Because when you're killing, there needs to be a certain amount of craving, a certain amount of anger in your mind, a certain amount of ill will, and that weighs on the organs of the body. And animals that do that will tend to have a shorter lifespan. This is where if you look at snakes, they tend to live for about 10 to 20 years at the very most, like 20 years, because they're constantly killing in order to sustain their life. So being in the animal realm, it's very challenging to get out of that, because oftentimes you're in an existence that requires you to kill in order to actually survive and sustain your life. Not only are you killing, but you're also stealing, right? You're stealing food, you're stealing supplies. You might be trying to force people off of a territory so that you can be able to take over the territory. You're stealing maybe somebody else's kill. If a lion killed a certain animal, you might try to steal that from them. And then there's a certain amount of sexual misconduct. right? That there's constant having sex with lots of different animals, lots of different species within, or lots of different individuals within your same species. So when the Buddha is teaching about right action, when you look at right action in the Eightfold Path, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, that's helping you get away from your craving, your anger, and your ignorance. And those are the things that animals tend to do, is kill, steal, and have sexual misconduct. So that's why he names those three in the Eightfold Path as part of right action, because that's helping you get away from those animalistic instincts of killing, of stealing, and having sexual misconduct. And that's why he calls those out. But you understand right action is all about not causing harm with your bodily actions. But he calls those three out specifically because it's helping you get away from these animalistic instincts. So an animal has no motivation other than its own basic survival instincts. That's all that it's doing. An animal is just trying to survive. They don't have the concept of, let me become a better being, let me try to get to enlightenment, let me improve my life. It's just survival. It's all about playing, killing, stealing, sleeping, sexually having sex in order to reproduce. That's all that an animal's thinking about, right? It's just doing these basic survival things. So being in the animal realm, it's much like a prison because you're just trapped doing these things, operating on craving over and over and over and over again. Then in the hell realm, these beings experience exclusively painful feelings. They don't experience any pleasant feelings, and they don't even experience neither painful nor pleasant. It's just painful feelings and only painful feelings. They're formless beings, and they're being reborn there because they have extensive amounts of craving, anger, and ignorance. And this is where they're being reborn in order to eliminate those things, because they can't eliminate them 100% in the hell realm, but they can extinguish them to a certain degree to at least move up into animal or afflicted spirits. You can even come from the hell realm right into the human realm, and you can even go from the hell realm up to the heavenly realm. The Buddha describes this in his teachings. It's very rare, of course, for this to occur, but it is possible to go from hell even up to heavenly realm. And this is why you can see beings in the human realm, for example, that sometimes when beings come into the human realm, maybe by the age of 12 or 16 or 18, they're showing signs of being like a serial murderer, for example. Like if you were a lion in a animal existence and you're coming right into the human world, your mind has been conditioned in that way. So now in the human world, your mind's still functioning that way. You might end up being a serial murderer, where you're still murdering, you're still killing because your mind has been conditioned that way. Remember, the teachings of the Buddha are helping you understand the world around you and the way the world is. These aren't beliefs. These are things that you can see for yourself, because you might ask yourself, why are people coming into the world and by the age of 12 or 16, they're showing signs of being a serial murderer? Or you can have serial rapists who are raping people, right? And this is because of the animalistic instincts of having been reborn in the animal realm so many times and coming right into the human realm from like an existence like a lion or a tiger or some other vicious animal, where coming out from a elephant, for example, into the human realm, you're going to be more loving and more kind and more compassionate, because that's where your mind was prior to this existence. Each time you're being reborn, it's actually a new existence. It's a new body and it's a new mind every single time. It's not the same exact consciousness. So while we say the cycle of rebirth, in reality, the better way to think about it is the cycle of new existence, because the word that's used in the original teachings of the Buddha is samsara. This is the word that people have been translating over to the cycle of rebirth. But when you see the way the Buddha describes the cycle of rebirth, or the samsara, he's describing it as a new body and a new mind every single time. And you can see that for yourself. Essentially what we have is we have this cardboard box. This cardboard box represents the mind. And this particular cardboard box, A, has a certain shape, a certain color, a certain texture, a certain color. And there are certain contents that are inside this cardboard box. When we get to the end of this life, if there's craving in the mind, that's the fuel that causes rebirth. So the box dissolves. The mind is impermanent. The box dissolves, but the contents inside the box are still there, and it needs to find a new box. So now it moves into cardboard box B. And cardboard box B is a completely different color, shape, texture, color, shape, and all these different things, but the contents are from the previous cardboard box. So this body and this mind that you now inhabit, it's completely new for this existence, but there's contents inside this mind that are from a previous life, and they can come into this particular mind. Another way to think about this craving as being the fuel that causes rebirth or this new existence is that if you think about a fire that has a bunch of logs on it, in this fire with all the logs are the fuel. And as long as this fire has fuel, it's going to send off sparks. And when the sparks are going up into the air, the wind is going to carry it. And now when the spark lands, it's going to ignite a new fire. It's a brand new fire. It's not the same fire as the other fire. It's a completely brand new fire. But it was started by this particular spark. So craving in your mind, not only is it causing discontentedness, it's the spark, it's the fuel that's causing rebirth. If it wasn't for that craving in the mind, it wouldn't produce a new existence. So if you've ever felt the heat in the chest or in the face when you get really angry or you're craving something and you're really wanting something really bad and you feel that heat in the face, that's the fire. That's the fuel. That's the spark that's coming up, right? So if you get to the end of your life and you still have this fuel on the fire, then it's going to produce a next existence, another mind that then needs to find a certain realm to be within. So whether we're born in one of these realms or not, it's determined based on the condition of your mind at the time of death. There's no being that's overseeing this and judging you for the totality of everything you've done during your life and then deciding where you should go. And then that's a permanent existence. This is a big misunderstanding in some places in the world where they think there's some being that's looking over the totality of your life and trying to decide where you go, either to a good place or a bad place, and then you go there for eternity and you only get one life. This is actually untrue. And oftentimes when people think this way, when they're experiencing painful feelings, they might think a solution to that is to kill themselves, right? You might think that suicide is an option in order to get rid of these painful feelings. But if you understand the cycle of rebirth, then you understand that's the last thing you would be interested in doing. If you're experiencing painful feelings in this existence, killing this being isn't going to solve it because there's still a craving in the mind. And now, because of that craving for non-existence, that craving for death, you're going to be reborn into another existence. And it's very likely that you could be reborn into hell, the animal realm, or the afflicted spirit realm. And now the problem's gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse. So suicide is not an option. But unfortunately, when we are contemplating suicide, usually we're not really interested in dying. We just want to get rid of the painful feelings. But an individual doesn't know how to do that in the unenlightened state because they lack wisdom. So because of the lack of wisdom of not knowing how to get rid of the painful feelings and the lack of wisdom of the cycle of rebirth, sometimes people think that suicide is an actual option to be able to get rid of the painful feelings, when in reality, it's just making them worse because now you're going to be reborn potentially into the lower realms where things are just going to be worse for you. So each of these realms have different qualities, and it's always craving, desire, attachment that's leading to this continuous cycle. And you can see this, that every human being, since we're familiar with human births, every human being that's born has craving. This is why when a baby comes out from the mom's womb, they cry right away, because they're discontent when they come into the world, because they were inside the mom's womb. Everything was perfect. Everything was comfortable. Their mind's craving this permanence. And now when they're pushed out into the world, or when there's a surgery to bring them out into the world, right away the mind's discontent because the mind's craving. That's the fuel that's causing rebirth. And this is why every being that is being reborn has craving, because that's the fuel that causes this continuous rebirth. So the Buddha describes the animal realm and the hell realm as a prison, that once you're there, it's very hard and very challenging to get out of. But there's a very good chance that you were in this realm, in one of these realms, definitely the animal realm. You may not remember this right now, but one of the reasons why it's important to understand the cycle of rebirth is that as you're training your mind with all these teachings that the Buddha shares, and you're getting the pollution out of your mind, it's very likely that you might observe your past lives. And this could really shake you up if you didn't realize you had past lives. If you start having memories of being murdered in your past life, maybe having sexually been abused in your past life, or any number of different things, you can even have personality qualities from your past lives. You can have certain cravings from those past lives that you experience in this life. If you didn't understand this was coming from a past life, it could really shake you up. So one of the reasons why the Buddha taught the cycle of rebirth is, of course, because it's true and it's actually what is truly happening. But also, as you're getting rid of your pollution with the Eightfold Path and all the other teachings that he teaches you, if you start having residual memories of your past lives, you can just understand that, this is normal. This is very normal, right? And you can just let it go, realizing it's in the past. The other reason why he taught this is because as your mind's becoming more and more awake, you might actually experience communication with beings in one of these realms. Because the hell beings, the afflicted spirit beings, and the heavenly beings, even though they're formless, they can actually communicate with you. We oftentimes think about these things as being really far apart and separated, especially since we use the word realm. You might think that heaven is like in some far distant land, or hell is like down in the core of the earth. If you've been taught this isn't actually true. These existences, these realms, it's all right here in the same time and space. So just like a human being is sitting here in this chair, if I got up and left and we left the door open, it'd be very likely that a dog could come in here and sit in this chair, because we're in the same time and we're in the same space. So these beings of hell, the afflicted spirits in heavenly realm, they're all right here in the same time and space as us. So they can communicate with you. So this is a second reason why the Buddha shared the cycle of rebirth. Because if you started getting this communication from hell beings or heavenly beings or afflicted spirit beings, this could shake you up if you didn't understand that this conversation that you're hearing is not from anybody here, it's from one of these other realms. But when you're experiencing that, it's just like you're sitting at a restaurant and there's some human beings over there talking, and maybe they're talking a little bit loud and you just ignore it and you stay focused on your conversation. That's what you can do when you're hearing these conversations from beings from these other realms. People might say this person is schizophrenic. This is a misunderstanding. They're actually hearing a real conversation. And sometimes what they're hearing is demonic, very dark voices in their head. And that's because it's the hell beings and the afflicted spirit beings as well. But you can also have these heavenly beings that are looking to influence you in positive and wholesome ways too. So this isn't a mental illness. It's just that the mind hasn't learned to tune that out, so that when you are at a restaurant and you're tuning out the next table over that's talking a little bit loud, you can do the same thing with these beings. You don't have to pay attention to what it is that they're sharing, and you don't have to go forward with this very darkness that they're maybe trying to incentivize you to do. And same thing with the heavenly beings when they're trying to influence you in a wholesome way. You can choose to listen to that or not. It's just like a table in a restaurant. You could listen to their conversation or not. So you might end up hearing communication from these different beings in these different realms. And then a third reason why the Buddha taught the cycle of rebirth is because as your mind's becoming more and more awake, you might actually see some of these beings. Even though they're formless beings, there's some people who can see heavenly beings or afflicted spirits. If you've ever seen a ghost before, you weren't going crazy. They're actually real. I've seen ghosts before myself. They're actually real. Same thing with hell beings. You can actually see. Some people can see these beings. Not everybody, because of impermanence. But if you didn't understand that these beings existed and you saw a ghost, you'd be really shaken up by that, right? But you don't need to be shaken up by that. That's just the mind having craving that you're comfortable with seeing another human being. You're comfortable with seeing an animal because they're formless, or they're formed. But these formless beings, your mind's not used to that. So when it experiences a formless being and you're like, whoa, what was that? Your mind can be shaken up. But you don't have to be shaken up with these things. These are just beings that exist in the cycle of rebirth, and you might experience communication from them. You might actually see them, and you might even observe your own past lives as well as you're going through and awakening your mind. Some people even experience these things without being on the path to enlightenment. So if you've ever experienced deja vu, for example, we call deja vu where you're experiencing a certain thing and you know you've done that before, but you know it wasn't in this life. It just seems so utterly familiar to you, but it wasn't in this life. This is your residual memories from previous lives bubbling up to the surface of the mind. So there's these kinds of experiences and others that you can experience that are completely normal. And if you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth, you wouldn't know that. So that's why the Buddha is teaching this to you, so that you can be comfortable and steady and stable and just understand that this is a normal part of life. So any questions on any of the 5 realms and what's experienced there? You guys online, if you have questions, you can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Rachel has a question. Let's go to Rachel. And then Leo and Steve, I see you guys have questions too.
Hi, good afternoon, David. You just mentioned schizophrenia. I didn't follow that part well. Could you say more about it? Or did Buddha say anything about people with schizophrenia? Or I know though at his time there was no such word. Did he provide any explanations on schizophrenia?
He didn't provide any explanation on schizophrenia because that didn't exist during his lifetime. These are things that have come about in the last, 100 years or so because of what I'm sharing, in my opinion, is a misunderstanding of the human experience, that we're thinking that these things are mental illnesses like depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, bulimia, anorexia, personality disorders, all these kinds of things. You can trace in the teachings of the Buddha exactly what this is, which is an untrained mind. Even things like ADHD and ADD, this is just a mind that hasn't been trained to have concentration. And in a world with so much stimulation, the mind hasn't learned to be focused and concentrated. It's bouncing around. It's not a medical problem, even though we present it that way and we're taught that that's what it is. It's just that the mind is lacking wisdom and it hasn't been trained to have concentration. And the same thing with like eating disorders. Oftentimes there's a craving in the mind to look a certain way, and the mind thinks that everybody should look a certain way. So now someone might have an eating disorder because they're trying to get to that perfect image that the mind is craving. And the same thing with schizophrenia is that oftentimes you're hearing voices, and the people are being taught that these are delusions or hallucinations and things like that. And while hallucinations are real and you can truly have real delusions, if you're hearing voices in the mind, this is oftentimes beings from other realms that are communicating and attempting to communicate with you. And I've worked with some students that have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and they're training their mind with these teachings, as well as all these eating disorders and bipolar disorder and depression and all these different things that today we're referring to as mental illness. You can see if you or people around you are diagnosed with these kinds of things, if they start training their mind, you can eliminate these symptoms, and you can see that the mind can actually get to stability. Because myself, I was actually taught that I had mental health issues as I was growing up as well. And I used to take medicine for about 24 years. And eventually, by the time I trained my mind with these teachings, I was able to eliminate all of that stuff. And I eliminated all the symptoms as well. But oftentimes people are just believing that they're mentally ill and they're taking medication, but it's not actually solving the problem. But by the time you train your mind with these teachings, you can actually solve the symptoms by getting to the root cause, which is the pollution in the mind.
For people like with ADHD or schizophrenia, is mindfulness meditation, you just mentioned mindfulness meditation is helpful through your experience, but now in the medical world, people say mindfulness doesn't work for this group of people.
Yeah, if somebody isn't...
It's very difficult for them.
Sure. If somebody isn't trained in the path to enlightenment and understand the teachings in detail, if they're just practicing a bit of mindfulness, they don't have the full, complete solution. And this is the challenge, that in some environments, they might just be teaching meditation and they're not teaching all the other things that need to go along with it, like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, eliminating the 10 fetters, the 3 poisons, all these things that I share with you guys. Those things aren't usually being presented. So if you're just learning meditation and that's it, then you don't have the complete package that you need to fully transform the mind. And this is why someone might have the opinion that mindfulness by itself isn't working. Well, yeah, it's because it's mindfulness by itself. It's not just the meditation that you need. So someone might say, meditation doesn't work to fix bipolar, but that's because they're not training their mind with all the other things that they need. They're just meditating and that's it. So meditation is part of the solution, but you need all these other teachings as well. This is why the Buddha didn't get to enlightenment and just teach meditation. Right? If it was only meditation that you needed, he would have just taught meditation and that's it. But that's why we have 45 volumes of books, because there were so many other things that he needed to teach in order to help people get to enlightenment. And this is where you can understand that there's more that's needed than just meditation.
Thank you. And another question is about people with special needs. Did Buddha provide any explanations on people with special needs? People who were born with special needs?
Yeah, this is like the gamma, right? Like say like there's a brain, challenge in the brain that the brain didn't develop to a certain extent, or let's say you're born blind or something like this. This is our gamma from our previous life, that we've been born into this life, and now this particular body can't sustain life in the same way that maybe someone else whose brain is fully developed, or they have sight or something like this. But also these individuals can potentially get to enlightenment at death too, because while I'm sure it's very challenging to go through life without seeing and without hearing, I imagine that's very challenging to experience. Those are 2 less sense bases that they now are experiencing contact through, with less opportunity for the mind to become discontent. So they could actually potentially experience enlightenment in this life if they have the ability to learn, if they have the ability to intellectually understand. There's the ability to get to enlightenment. But there's some beings who are going to be born into this world that don't have that ability because of impermanence. Not everybody's brain is fully functioning. Not everybody's heart is fully functioning. So we're going to see beings now and forever that come into, or now into the end of humanity, come into this world that don't have full faculties, and some of us do and some of us don't, and this is impermanence. For the beings who do and the beings who don't, this is our either wholesome karma or unwholesome karma. So that's why if you, which I know you are in a human existence where your brain is fully functioning, your mind is fully functioning, all your senses are fully functioning, don't allow this existence to go to waste, because this is very rare. This is a very rare opportunity to come into this human world. One of the stories that the Buddha gives to help you understand how rare it is to get into this human realm is he talks about the earth being flooded with water. And he says if the world was flooded with water in the entire earth, and there's a ring that is tossed onto the surface of the water, and now the wind is blowing this ring around northward, southward, westward, eastward, and there's this turtle at the bottom of the water that comes up for a breath of air once every 100 years. With the world completely flooded and this ring being blown around on the surface of the earth as large as it is, how rare do you think it is that this turtle coming up to the surface once every 100 years is going to put its head through that ring? It's very rare that that turtle would be able to put its head through that ring, because this ring is all over the surface of the earth. And he says that's how rare it is that you get this human existence. So now that we're in this human existence, if we have full faculties, I would not allow it to go to waste and use it to be able to get to enlightenment, use it as motivation to be able to get to enlightenment.
Thanks. And the last question, that is for people who were born with full faculty but lost part of it like in an accident. So did Buddha have any explanations on those accidents?
This is also karma as well, because there's a sequence of events. There's certain decisions that were made that led to that particular accident, and that person is experiencing the results of that. So like I remember one time when I was a kid, I was growing up, I was in wood shop and I was learning how to use this sanding saw, or this rotating sander, this disc sander. And the teacher always taught us to sand it on one side because the momentum of the sander, it keeps the wood where it needs to go, and you're not supposed to do it on this side. Well, me with my ego, and there was this cute little girl who was interested in learning how to use the sander. I took her over there and I was like, see, this is the sander, and you're supposed to sand it this way, and you're supposed to sand it over here, and you're not supposed to sand it over here. And then I did that, and the piece of wood flew out of my hand and my finger went into the sander, and it sanded the skin off of the finger and a little bit down towards the bone, right? So that accident that I experienced was a result of my decisions. My conceit, my unwise decisions led to this experience where I was sanding off the tip of my finger because I was trying to show off in front of this girl. So not every accident is that type, but whenever we experience anything in life, it's a cause and effect, or action and result, and we're experiencing the results of those things. So if we're driving super fast and we get in a car accident and our arm gets amputated, that's a result of our decisions. That's our unwholesome karma. There's no being that's overseeing that and controlling it. We're not being punished or rewarded in any situation. It's a result of our decisions. So each one of these kinds of situations, it's our karma that we're experiencing, either wholesome or unwholesome.
What if like one is careful when he or she is driving, but he was bumped into by another car? That is not his fault.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? It wasn't quite clear.
What if one is driving carefully on the road and he's following all the rules, but then another car bumped into him, then he had the accident?
Okay.
This also karma.
Yeah, this is also karma. So when you're thinking about karma, don't think about blame or fault. The natural law of karma isn't determining who's at fault, right? It's a sequence of events. So let's just say I'm sitting at a traffic light in a car, minding my own business, and it's a red light, and I'm just sitting there, sitting in the car. Let's just say somebody comes up behind me and wham, rams me in the back of the car, and I get whiplash, right? This is still karma. Right? This is the results of decisions. There was a sequence of events that occurred. And my contribution to this event is that I chose to buy a car. I chose to get in that car. I chose to drive it. I chose to go down that street. I chose to sit at that light. There's a sequence of events that occurred. So oftentimes when the mind thinks about karma, it thinks about fault and blame or punishment and rewards. But it's best to think of it as a sequence of events, that there's a certain sequence of events that led to any particular result that we experience. So while we call it wholesome and unwholesome, and people sometimes think of that as good or bad, meaning I've done something good or I've done something bad, we might think that if I'm experiencing bad karma or unwholesome karma, I've done something that's bad. But that's not the case, that you can be sitting at a traffic light and you can experience unwholesome karma where wham, you get into a car accident, you hit somebody, right? Or somebody hits you, I mean. So as those are occurring, there's a certain sequence of events on your side and a sequence of events on the other side too. Maybe they didn't maintain their car, or maybe they were texting or talking on the phone when they were driving, or maybe they were listening to music and distracted, or any number of different things. But there was a sequence of events that created this experience, and now we're experiencing the results of that.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like Leo, you have a question?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Your example with the motivation that now is a chance is good, but it makes also anxiety. So what do you think about that? Is there no reason to be excited?
Excited?
Yeah, excited. Anxious? I mean,
yeah, the only reason why those feelings would arise is because of cravings. So when I say use it as motivation, I mean wise decision making, but don't allow the mind to crave enlightenment. But if you see that occurring, you're going to need to eliminate that craving. And I've given you guidance on that, how to do that. But there's no need to be excited about this existence, but use it wisely, because understanding that it is the ideal existence, don't allow it to go to waste. But don't allow the mind to get excited about that. because that would just be conditional excitement.
Like anxious, right? I mean, anxious, afraid. I mean,
same thing.
Because afraid of dying early, because of old karma maybe, or trying to be doing everything good, but there comes a moment where you did a mistake and then you're dead, and the chance is for the next million years is away.
The way that I would encourage people to think about this is, at this point in time, you don't know how long you're going to live, right? You don't know what unwholesome karma you have from previous lives, what this body is going to experience. You don't know what decisions are going to be made that lead to any particular thing. You could die today. You don't know, right? So all you do is you set yourself up to say, you know what? I'm going to do the best I can do in this life to get as close to enlightenment as possible. And if I get it, great. If I don't get it, hey, wonderful. I practiced, I improved my consciousness or this consciousness. And then in the next life, it'll be that much further along. So you just do the best you can do in this life. And wherever life is done, then it's done and it's over. But you don't need to crave it, because if you crave getting to enlightenment, or you crave this existence, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. So just do the best you can and realize that, hey, I'm going to get as close to it or to it as possible. And I'll just continually work towards getting closer and closer to enlightenment. And that's it. It's a lifelong journey. It's developing a life practice.
And another question, for example, becoming a woman or a man in the human realm, has it to do something with different realms, like heavenly realms become a man more often, and people who come from hell realms, for example?
So in the animal realm, we have different genders. I don't know whether that's true in the hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm. I know in the heavenly realm there are different genders there, but I don't know about the hell and the afflicted spirit. A lot of us are being reborn out of the animal realm. So let's just say we've been a female multiple times in the animal realm, or coming into this existence. We could potentially be a male, or we could be a female. And this is where I've talked about transgender individuals before, where you understand the mind is one thing and the body is different. And this is why we have people who the consciousness, the mind ends up in a male body, but the consciousness identifies as a female. And this is very normal. And you can understand that through the cycle of rebirth. But what determines this is karma. But it's not wholesome or unwholesome. It's just a sequence of events, of things that happen. And exactly how that is determined, I don't know. And this is one of the things that the Buddha teaches, is that we shouldn't speculate about the world, and we won't be able to know the exact result of any karma, because it leads to madness or frustration. But somewhere along the line, beings are either becoming male or female, and however that happens, so be it. And then there's beings that are born in one particular body, but their mind identifies with something different. And this is just all normal and part of the way the cycle of rebirth works.
And more interest again, the beings are here in the realm, from different realms, which are also here in this room. Mm-hmm. They listen to your teachings, trying to understand that. Do they do this, or?
Heavenly beings can listen to the teachings and learn them and grow and develop. I've never seen any heavenly beings here, like with my eyes. I've felt heavenly beings, not just here, but at other places in my life. I know that heavenly beings exist, and I've experienced them before. I've experienced communication from heavenly beings before. So that's how I know that these things occur, because I've seen it and experienced it with my own direct experience. Same thing with hell beings. Same thing with Mara. I've had contact with Mara. That's how I know that it's true. Same thing with afflicted spirits or ghosts. I've experienced those kinds of things. So where things are going on that are wholesome, this is where heavenly beings tend to be around those places. Things that are very dark and dingy and harsh kind of lifestyle, this is where the hell beings and the afflicted spirits tend to be. So that's why you're interested in associating with wholesome things. The Buddha even teaches this about going out at the daylight hours, because if you're interested in walking towards the light, he teaches to go out at the daylight hours, where if you can imagine during his lifetime, nighttime was probably very dark, right? Because we have electric and we have lights and stuff. They had lights too, like oil lamps and stuff, but it's not the same brightness as the lights that we have. So he would advise people not to go out at nighttime, not because you need to be scared about that, but if you've been to any particular cities, you can see that a city becomes a different place at nighttime. Even a place like Chiang Mai, if you go out real late at night, there's different things that go on in the midnight hours than in the daylight hours. So the Buddha teaches, if you're interested in walking towards the light and getting to enlightenment, to go out in the daylight hours. And the reason why is because that's when wholesome things tend to be occurring in the world, where unwholesome things tend to be occurring in the darkness. So if you're interested in getting to the light, go out in the light. And that's where not only human beings that are into wholesome things tend to associate, but also these heavenly beings tend to be out during the wholesome time frame of the day as well.
I sometimes like it go out in the darkness, because, for example, at Christmas, winter, or whatever, look, or the light, it's so quiet outside, not so many people. But you say it's better to go not in the.
Yeah, I enjoy going out at nighttime too. In the past, I used to enjoy going out at nighttime a lot more. Now I tend to go out in daylight hours versus nighttime hours. So it's not that you can't go outside in the nighttime, but generally unwholesome things tend to happen at nighttime, right? This is when murders happen. This is when, people steal things, these kinds of things. So if you're interested in being around wholesome things and making wise decisions, the Buddha is suggesting that you generally choose to go out in the daylight hours. He has an interesting phrase. He calls it, you shouldn't haunt the streets at unfitting times. When I read that, I was like, I've done that plenty of times. I've haunted the streets at unfitting times many times in the past. But you know what, Buddha? You're right. I shouldn't be doing that anymore. So I'm not going to do that. So that particular phrase sticks in my mind because, I used to haunt the streets at unfitting times because those are when unwholesome things are going on. And when I was out at those times, I was doing some unwholesome things. So if you'd like to go out during those time frames, do that. That's your choice. But just realize that that's when a lot of unwholesome things are happening.
And one more, please. You talked about that a lot of things come from previous lives, like the craving and so on.
A lot of things come from what?
Like craving and these kind of things come from past karma or previous lives.
Yep.
How can you say how much percent? I mean, many things are also happen because of our environment. We change a lot. Can we say, I think because of impermanence we can say, but maybe because scientists say, it's because of this and that, the environment. And what do you think about?
You can't quantify it. I know this to be true because there were certain cravings I had throughout this life that I didn't understand them as cravings at that time. But once I started understanding these teachings, once I started looking at my past lives and I saw my past lives, I could see certain things I was doing in this life was based on cravings from a previous life. But to say how much percentage for each person is going to be different for every person. So you can't quantify it. Yep, you're welcome. Mr. Steve.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, the heavenly realm, you can regress back from the heavenly realm into the other realms?
You can, that's true.
Okay, the second thing is, I know there's limitations on language, but when we say you have been reborn many times, I have been reborn many times, as per the heading, is it more that my consciousness has existed in different lives?
Yeah, this is the interesting thing, is that there's nothing that's actually being reborn, and it's a new consciousness every time. So that's why the cycle of new existence is a much better way to think about it. Another way to think about it is like a series of candles, right? And each individual candle is a unique candle. And when this candle is lit and it burns down, that candle, when it's done and it's extinguished, the spark lights the next candle. It's a completely different candle, a new candle. Or another way to think about it is like a necklace of beads. And all these beads are unique beads. They're unique shapes and unique colors and textures. But there's like this string that kind of goes through all these beads and kind of connects them all together. And this is the sequence of events from one existence to another. So there isn't really anything that's being reborn from one existence to another. It's a completely new mind, a completely new body. But the contents of this mind can move into the next mind, which is what I observed and which I know is the truth of what's actually happening. But beings can be reborn in and out of all of these realms. One thing that I meant to mention when we were talking about the cycle or the stages of enlightenment as it relates to the cycle of rebirth is once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will never be reborn into the lower realms again. This is one of the reasons why getting to the first stage of enlightenment is so helpful, in that your mind doesn't regress, not only in this life, but in your future lives too. You will only ever be reborn into the human realm, or if you get to that third stage of enlightenment, into the heavenly realm. So getting to the first stage of enlightenment is so important because you will get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time. So you'll never be reborn into the lower realms again because you've evolved to become a certain type of human being. And that's why, having become a better and better human being, if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you've become a better human being. So if you die, you're being reborn right back into the human realm. Your consciousness has evolved beyond the lower realms. So each time it's a new consciousness, a new being, a new mind.
Right. And in any case, I won't be able to piece together, like, going back a gazillion years of the various lives, but I just need to know that at this point in time, there's an aspect of my consciousness that has existed before and has carried karma into this current existence.
Yeah, so the mind itself didn't exist before. The mind here, this mind of Steve, it didn't exist, but the contents that are inside this mind did exist before. And there was the last part of your question. I was going to share something with you. Can you say that last part of your question again, if you remember it?
I forget.
Oh, this person, this consciousness existed before.
Well, what I was saying is that, yes, I technically speaking, I didn't exist before, but an aspect of something in my mind certainly did exist in previous lives realm.
Exactly. You've got it. Because there's no I here.
Yeah.
There's no I to exist. So that's why this...
And I need to know that as a result of my actions in this life, something is going to be reborn.
Something is going to exist again.
Exist again.
Or not exist again. There's going to be a new existence.
A new existence.
Based on the things that are happening.
Based on things that I do now.
Yeah.
And yes, and yes.
But it doesn't have to be, because you can extinguish all that fuel that's in this mind.
Yes, that's right. And
then,
so there, and
then there won't be a next existence.
And the underlying motivation for that is,
in my opinion, as we become more loving and kind and compassionate, the last thing you're interested in doing is setting up and queuing up another existence for some other being.
Okay,
right?
That's a good answer. Yes, it's sometimes taken for granted, like what's the motivation for doing this?
Yeah.
Particularly when the Buddha himself said, I'm not going to tell you what happens when you die in an enlightened state.
The motivation to me is to get away from those discontent feelings.
Yeah.
Right. In this life, and to get to the peace and the joy.
Yeah,
That's
keep it practical.
Yeah. Right now, you're interested in getting to that peace and joy now in this life. And the last thing you're interested in doing is leaving a bunch of garbage around for the next person to deal with. Right. So if you can clean up all the garbage now, then there's no need for another being. It's not going to come into existence. So it's kind of like you clean up your house. Like when I was a Boy Scout, when I was growing up, we were taught that whenever we went to a campsite, to always leave the campsite in a better condition than which we found it, right? So if there was a bunch of leaves and branches and twigs everywhere, we learned to clean it up before we left and leave it in a better condition than which we found it. So the same thing, in my opinion, should be true here in this life is, if you don't get to enlightenment, at least leave this in a better condition than it was when you found it, right? But ideally, get to enlightenment in this life so that there's no future life. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I didn't know who was next.
So I'm curious, David, about near-death experiences. This idea of, not almost being called back, that it's not your time. So could you just kind of put that in context, please?
I've never had one of these experiences.
I have actually.
But I've talked with people, and I've seen, on TV when these things have occurred. In my opinion, what I think, based on what I've heard and what I know about the cycle of rebirth, is I think an individual's mind is potentially going to, the being is potentially going to die, and the mind is starting to see some of those steps to that next life or the next rebirth. And now, for whatever reason, that being decides, no, I'm going to stay here in this existence. And now it comes back to this existence, and it continues in this existence.
And would there be maybe a different motivation after that? Before and after? Like, almost like, the reason I had this happen to me, so this is a personal situation.
This is where,
because I remember re-entering my body. It was incredibly painful.
I think your mic went out. I think so. So you said it was extremely painful. I heard you.
Yeah. So, and I was very aware of returning into my body and what a shock that was. But there was this, and I don't know now if this is just something I made up, I don't know, but this sense of I wasn't done and that there was another opportunity. But I don't know if I really took that into my consciousness as if there was something incomplete this lifetime that I had agreed to. So I guess it's kind of now, like this one precious life and this opportunity. I've never really looked at it in such a deep way until I've gotten deeper into the teachings.
And you were talking about motivation there, that oftentimes after people have had near-death experiences, there's a motivation to do better and be a better human being after that. And that's where like our mind wakes up a bit, right? And we get more wisdom because we realize, oh my goodness, this life is not all there is. There's more beyond this life, that there is continuous life if we, continue forward. So this is where there can be built-in motivation when you awaken to that wisdom of, oh my goodness, this life isn't all there is. There is more beyond this life. So that's where it can be motivating to say, oh my goodness, let me be a better human being because I know there's something after this and I'm interested in that thing being as good as possible. And what's after this is if you don't get to enlightenment, there's going to be rebirth. And then if you get to enlightenment, then, the Buddha doesn't share if there is anything next.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, David. For Sotapanna, or for stream enter, you're saying 7 lives or less, rebirth not in a lower realm, but if not reaching once returner, are you saying, I'm trying to understand, so the stream enter would be more likely to enter the human realm and not the heaven realm? I wasn't understanding.
If you die as a stream enter, you will come back to the human realm, but a maximum of 7 times. So like, let's just say this is your first birth into the human realm. And let's just say you get to the stream entry and let's just say you die there. Then you will come back into the human realm again in your next birth. And then let's just say that when you get up to the stream entry level, then you will come back again into the human realm because you've escaped these lower realms. Once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the human realm. And then same thing in the second stage, that once returner. From there, you're going to come back one more time and you'll get to enlightenment in that next life. So you don't have to be reborn 7 times as a stream enter, but a maximum of 7. So I speak about all of these things from my experiences because I know this to be the third human existence that I've had, where the first human existence, I know what I did there. Then there was a second human existence and I know what I did there. And now there's this third one here. So it doesn't have to be 7 births, but it can be a maximum of 7 births before you ultimately get to enlightenment. So it's a maximum of 7, and you're always coming back into the human realm if you're in the first or second stage of enlightenment. The third stage, you're moving to the heavenly realm and you're going to get to enlightenment there. And then the fourth stage, the mind's enlightened, so you're not going to be reborn anywhere.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so I have a little bit more here to share with you guys. So to understand how the mind experiences being able to observe past lives, I'm using this analogy to help you understand this, that when your mind is polluted, it's like walking out onto the street. You walk out of your house, you walk out the front door, and you're standing on that street, and you see that street. That's what you see. And you see that life, and you see what you're doing in this life. But as you clear out your mind of pollution, it's like moving to a higher vantage point. You're moving to a higher consciousness. And when you move to this higher vantage point, you don't just see one street anymore. You can see all these multiple streets and how they interconnect. You can even see how one town interconnects with another town because you've now moved to this higher consciousness. You've moved to a higher vantage point. From this higher consciousness that you're working and evolving to accomplish, not only can you potentially see your past lives, but you actually see this life more clearly. Right? That some of you guys might be experiencing that, where as you're learning some of the teachings of the Buddha, you look back over this life and you're like, whoa, I can see things more clearly now. I can see where I was in that argument. I was causing my own discontentedness, and I didn't have to argue, but I was arguing back then 5 years ago, right? So you can see those kinds of things even in this life. By moving to a higher consciousness, you can see this life more clearly. And as you move higher and higher to this higher consciousness, having gotten rid of the pollution of your mind, this is why there's the potential to be able to see past lives. And when these things are occurring, you don't need to induce this. You don't need to force it. You don't need to be scared or worried, and you don't even need to be craving this, because not everybody who gets to enlightenment will see their past lives. Some people will and some people won't. Not everybody will see their past lives. So if you see your past lives, this is the ultimate confirmation of the cycle of rebirth. But there's other things you can do to independently verify the cycle of rebirth that is beyond just seeing your past lives. But if you observe past lives, you'll know with 100% certainty that the cycle of rebirth is real. But there's other ways to independently verify it too. So this is why it's occurring, because your mind's moving to this higher vantage point, and that's why you're able to see your past lives. So there's various things that we could talk about here, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of summarize with this here. That moving the mind from the animal realm to the human realm, which all of us are now human, the vast majority of rebirths are actually happening from the animal realm. This is why the human consciousness in the unenlightened state is actually functioning very much like an animal, right? There's very few people who get to stream entry and who are reborn back into the human realm. Now that's going to be changing. The more these teachings are shared in the world, we're going to see more and more first, second, third, and fourth stages of enlightenment, and more people being reborn into the human realm and the heavenly realm. But as the animal realm is shrinking, we see the human realm expanding, right? Because we know from scientists that they tell us that 99% of all the animals that once existed don't exist any longer. That there's the animals that we see today represents only 1% of the animals that once existed. Well, if scientists are telling us that, that means the animal realm is shrinking. And if we saw the animal realm shrinking, then we should see the other realms expanding, right? That's what we should see. And that's exactly what we see. We see the human population expanding over the many years that there's been human existence. That's what we see, because animals are shrinking, humans are expanding. The unenlightened mind functions very much like an animal, like a lack of memory. We function on a praise and reward system. You like it when you get a certificate from your school, right? And you feel accomplished. Or when your parents told you, oh, good boy, good girl. You like that, right? Just like an animal, there's this praise and reward system. We also learn from a pack of like species. We have learned behaviors, right? When you are born as a monkey, you learn how to be a monkey from other monkeys. If you're a lizard, you learn how to be a lizard from other lizards. The same thing is true about humans. When we're born into the human world, we learn how to be humans from other humans. And this is why it's wise to be around people who are into wholesome things, because the human mind tends to conform to what people around you are doing. So if you're around a bunch of wholesome people, you'll tend to do wholesome things. And if you're around a bunch of unwholesome things, you'll tend to do those things. So there's certain instinctive behaviors, but the vast majority of what we experience in the human realm is learned behavior. And this is why cultivating wisdom is so important. We have these sayings in the English language. We say, you're acting like an animal, right? When somebody's like really angry and very hostile, we'll say, you're acting like an animal, or you're fighting like cats and dogs, right? We even label the behavior that we find to be undesirable. We label that as animalistic, right? We are human, but the unenlightened mind is functioning very much like an animal. Humans are fascinated with animals. Think about all the zoos we have in the world. Think about how we study animals. Think about how we have stuffed animals as a child. We wear prints, oftentimes that are animal prints. We even have animals living with us nowadays. Some people even sleep in the bed with animals. We're fascinated with animals in the human realm because of our existences, that we've been animals so many times. Even though we're in this human realm, we're just fascinated with animals because of our consciousness being conditioned over all those lifetimes in the animal realm. The animal consciousness is preoccupied with craving, anger, and ignorance, with ego and the protection of the self. As you've heard me talk about with ego, that in the animal realm, we had to have ego. We wouldn't have survived without it. We also need personal existence view in the animal realm. If we were a deer and we were out in the middle of the field and we weren't observant of this body and being worried about this body, we could be attacked by a predator and we would die. So our survival was built around having this personal existence view and this conceit. And that's why it's so hard in this human existence to get rid of the personal existence view and even just understand it and be able to get rid of it. And the same thing with the ego. And that's why it takes a long time to get rid of it, because for countless births, the Buddha even talks about this, countless births in the animal realm before we ever made it into the human realm, right? So that's why it's so hard to shed some of these fetters. So the unenlightened human consciousness, until we train it otherwise, functions very much like an animal. And we can shed these animalistic instincts. So when you're being bitter and harsh and hostile or aggressive, recognize that as animalistic behavior, and you're not interested in doing that anymore, and you'd like to evolve past that. Or when you're noticing the ego and you're trying to measure and compare people, notice that as the pecking order. The mind's trying to have this pecking order, and you're not interested in doing that anymore because you're not in the animal realm. You need to remind your mind, hey, I'm human. Come on, get with it. Get with the program here. We're human now. We don't have to look for a pecking order around us. So our consciousness in the human realm is oftentimes coming out of this these animal existences. So because even though it's a new consciousness, the conditioning is what's moving forward into this new mind. And now this new mind is conditioned much like an animal. And you're shedding those animalistic instincts. So that's what the path to enlightenment is. It's evolving from being a constant animal over and over and over again to becoming a better and better human being. The cycle of rebirth is helping you to become this better, improved human being where you're living peacefully with all beings. You can cohabitate with other beings, where animals, they can't often cohabitate with other animals. They have to be isolated, right? But us humans, we can learn to cohabitate cohesively with each other. All the condition of the planet that we see in the world, where we see like pollution and problematic things like this is all from the craving, anger, and ignorance. Every problem that is on the surface of the earth is caused by humans. Animals, while they have extensive craving, anger, and ignorance, they don't cause problems, right? They don't cause poverty. They don't cause a lot of the problematic things that we see, like the environmental issues that we see in the world. These are all human issues from craving, anger, and ignorance. So each one of us has the ability to walk towards the light and decide that we're done with the darkness. We're done with this animalistic behavior, and we'd like to become a better and better human being. It's just learning and training the mind to be able to do that. Okay, so anything else you guys would like to talk about here? Yep. I just kind of went through this stuff pretty quick here at the end, just in the interest of time, because I was interested in being respectful of y'all's time. But if you guys would like to talk more, let me know what your questions are.
Just a very quick one. I think all this cycle of rebirth, is it happening just within Earth, or is it happening in other galaxies?
Yeah, so the way that I understand it is that when you die in a particular region of the world, you tend to be reborn in that same region. Not always, but you tend to be reborn there. So this is why, like, if you die here in Thailand, you're going to tend to be reborn in Thailand. Or if you die anywhere else in the world, you'll tend to be reborn in that general area, but not always. I saw the two human existences before this. I wasn't in the land that we call America now, even though that's where I was born this time. That's not where I was the two previous human existences. But you tend to be reborn in the same place. So you're not going to jump planets to another galaxy. Yeah. It'd be interesting though, wouldn't it? Yeah. Leo?
Yeah, I just wonder about families who, for example, are really, really productive in their life, and the next generations also are more intelligent. It seems like that some families over generations, the sons and so on and daughters, got really high in positions. Has this something to do with the previous lives? No, that it has more to do maybe with how they learn from their parents. What do you think about that?
It has to do with the wisdom, right? It does have to do with previous lives, because you're being reborn into a family that has more wisdom. But now once you're in this life, you have a choice to make. Are you going to cultivate that wisdom or not? Because you can be born into a wise family and you can choose not to learn. That's choices that we make. But it is your karma to be reborn into that family. But then it's your karma also, because it's your choices and decisions of, are you going to learn from these people or not? And that's why certain families tend to be very successful, because they have certain wisdom that other families don't have. And you can cultivate that wisdom within that family or not. And this is where sometimes we think that things like drug abuse or alcohol abuse, we think it's genetic. But in reality, what it is it's that we haven't learned in our family unit how to deal with problems and struggles. That if we grew up with alcoholic parents, for example, and whenever they had a problem, they turned to alcohol, that's what we learned growing up. So when we aged and we started having problems, we turned to alcohol too. It's not that it's genetic. It's not that it's built into our DNA. It's that we lacked wisdom to realize that there's other ways to solve challenges and struggles. And we never learned that wisdom from our parents, because our parents didn't have that wisdom themselves. So when we grew up, what we learned is when we have a problem, we turn to drugs and alcohol. So if we grow up in a family that has challenges with drugs and alcohol, for example, we'll tend to do those things too. Where in the world, people are talking about this as like a genetic DNA thing, when in reality, it's actually just a lack of wisdom in the way that we grew up and what we see. And that's not to say that that's always the case, right? Because that would be permanence. There's certainly parents who've never had a drink before ever, and their children end up having alcohol or drug challenges, right? And there's people who have parents who do have alcohol and drug challenges that never use any kind of substances whatsoever, because that's the impermanent nature of things. But in a lot of cases, when we look at those of us that have had challenges with drugs and alcohol, for example, or even sexual misconduct, we can look at our parents and see that they were actually doing those exact same things. And that's where we learned it from, because of our conformity and our learned behavior. And that's what you're looking to evolve beyond. By getting better wisdom, we grew up with maybe a lack of wisdom, but now that we're adults, having lacked the wisdom and the guidance from our parents, we can choose as adults to gain wisdom and create a better life for ourselves.
What was it again with the intelligence? It's not genetic, you said? Also?
No, it's not genetic. It's from within the same family.
Yeah, our own choice to, for example, there are also families, the big brother or whatever seem to be very smart, and the other brothers are more, maybe don't have these skills.
Yeah, we're choosing whether to train our mind or not. We're choosing whether to acquire certain wisdom or not. So as we age, we're deciding, are we going to learn this thing or not? We have these opportunities, but you're born into a certain situation. Like, say, if I was born into a small tribe in Africa that was, impoverished and had a lack of food, and they were suffering from famine, I would have much less ability to cultivate wisdom in that situation than if I was born maybe somewhere else in the world. So where we're born is based on our karma, but once we're born into that particular situation, we then have new choices and decisions that we're making to be able to evolve beyond that. But then oftentimes, if you're born into an impoverished situation, like maybe a small tribe in Africa, it's very hard to cultivate wisdom beyond what you're experiencing within that tribe or within that family unit. And it might take you multiple existences to ever get to a human existence where you can get access to these teachings, perhaps. And that's our karma. That's the results of our decisions. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, you have another question?
Is it common or possible to run into, I know we get a new box each life, but is it possible to run into beings you've run into before? Like maybe you get this gut feeling like, oh, fast friends or maybe family members, for instance.
Yeah, the Buddha teaches this too, and you can see it within your own life as you start observing more and more of the cycle of rebirth, that if you've existed at a prior time around certain beings, and you guys didn't get to enlightenment, but yet you were like loving and kind and warm and gentle with each other, there's the potential to be reborn into a new life together. But you're not necessarily in the same roles. So like, I know that my mother in my past life, right before this, was my grandmother in this life. And her husband was her brother in this life. So even though in the past they were married and I was their son, in this life it was my great uncle, my grandmother, and I was their grandson. So we were kind of born in the same kind of proximity to each other. And the Buddha talks about this in his teachings, and you'll be able to see this if you end up seeing past lives. And there's ability to actually see other people's past lives too. Some people can see other people's past lives. This is a potential that can occur. Yep. Okay, so this was an interesting discussion, and you guys got an opportunity to learn the cycle of rebirth to a certain degree. There's much more to learn about this topic. This is just an introduction to help you guys get started to think about this, because as you're training your mind more and more deeply, either before the jhanas, in the jhanas, after the jhanas, you can start experiencing some of these things. So that's why it's important to start sharing this information with you guys at this point. As you guys have questions at any time, you're always welcome to ask me, let me know. It's not until volume 11 where you start really learning the realms of existence. So you'd like to gradually work your way through those and getting to that point, because you will need to look at the cycle of rebirth and understand it to a certain degree as you're making your way towards enlightenment. So as you guys have questions, feel free to let me know. So tomorrow, the topics that we're going to be discussing is, of course, we're going to start with our loving kindness meditation, but then I'm going to start off with helping you understand how to eliminate fears. Are you really scared? This is actually a really short talk that I'm going to be able to help you target your fears. So if there's any fears you have, spiders, snakes, the fear of death, any of these kinds of things, I'll be able to help you to understand how to actually eliminate them, go in and actually target it. Then after our mid-morning break, we'll be talking about this being of God, helping you understand this being, to either have a relationship with them or not. It's up to you what you choose. Then we're going to be in the afternoon. I'm going to help you to understand the meditation to eliminate sexual cravings, and then the meditation to realize non-self. This is what we're going to do in the afternoon, okay? Because these are going to help you with eliminating craving, desire, attachment for the sexual craving, or reduce it and or eliminate it, and also help you to realize non-self. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you for the discussion, and perhaps we'll see you tomorrow, okay? Be well.